So welcome. Thanks for coming out on this horrible day, and welcome to spring. This is our fourth program in the Meadville 1825 series, of which there are 20 more coming, so thank you for coming today. Our next program will be on Friday, April 4. We have two programs, actually. We have a children's art exhibit next door at Parish Hall. The Learning Center is hosting an open house, and in the Victorian parlor, we'll have an exhibit of children's artwork, which has been beautifully framed, and you should see it. It's very, very special. Also, Hatch Hollow is having an opening that same night on Friday, April 4, and they're showing works celebrating Meadville's heritage. They've selected 10 artists who are talking about the history of Meadville. They're painting about the history of Meadville. So please go to our Facebook page, Meadville 1825. That will keep you up to date with all of our free public programs, thanks to the Crawford County Heritage Foundation and our new sponsor, the Meadville Medical Center. There's calendars in the back if you want to see the coming events. And before I begin, I want everybody to look at this beautiful room. This was designed by George Washington Cullen. The building was completed in 1836. Look at the beautiful frieze around here. The Greek Revival trim in here is really beautiful. It's acanthus leaves and palm trees. Acanthus leaves are a botanical that was very important to the Greeks. And George Washington Cullen, who was a military engineer, and he also happened to be the son-in-law of Harm Huidekoper. So I think that was an inside job. Unfortunately, there's no bathrooms in this beautiful temple. Cullum did not include those in the plan, so bathrooms are next door. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, which most of you know. Josh Sherretts is the full-time executive director of the Crawford County Historical Society. He began his career at the Baldwin Reynolds House Museum as a student 20 years ago. He's a young man but has seniority. He also served as their president. Josh also co-founded the Bull Moose Marketing firm, assisting heritage tourism organizations with marketing, digital resources, and strategic growth, which is very important to all of us. Josh holds degrees in history and secondary education from Edinburgh University. He teaches public history and museum management at Allegheny College. He is an author and an NPR contributor. He serves on the Crawford County Convention and Visitors Bureau. He was also the Grand Marshal of this year's St. Patrick's Day Parade. I love that part about you. He lives in Meadville with his wife Kim and daughter Rosie. I've only been in Meadville for such a short time, but I was new, I didn't know anything. Josh was always in the front page or everywhere, so I knew about him right away. So please join me with a hearty welcome for Josh.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me as well? Fantastic. I will, as Tom mentioned, pardon me, as Tom mentioned about George Washington Cullum and the design of this building with no restrooms, I think it's probably to keep sermons brief. So I will do my best to at least be concise, which many of you who know me know that may be a problem, but we'll do our best. But before we do that, or before we dig into things, Tom and I were kind of joking about something earlier, so we'll rope all of you into it as well. So if you'd like to offend people on the Huidekoper end of things, and we don't know why, but it's just one of those things that you're so used to saying, most people hear Huidekoper, like hoop or whatnot, with the sort of the ooh sound. So and when I started at the Baldwin Reynolds House a couple of decades ago, everyone had said it to me that way, I had said it that way, did tours and it was mentioned that way, and then the family showed up. And that's happened a few times since. And I was very gently corrected and told, Mr. Sherretts, it's Huidekoper. And actually, so that said, if you want to learn a little bit of Dutch, it's actually Huidekoper. If everyone wants to try it once, why not? Huidekoper. But the American branch just goes to Huidekoper with a long O. So for some reason, though, you say Huidekoper in town and people give you this strange head cocked to one side look and think that you must be wrong. Occasionally they correct you, and then you can say that you heard it here, and we heard it from Beppy and Peter Huidekoper. So that said, let's dig in a little bit. Some of this is on Harm Jan Huidekoper and his essays and his sort of transformation from a Presbyterian to a Unitarian, and actually he's from a Mennonite to a Dutch Reformed to a Presbyterian to a Unitarian. And some of this is because of who it was, because it is sort of the patriarch of the Huidekoper family, and we can thank the family for a lot of things in Meadville, of which I won't start with a spoiler, so we'll get to those as we go. I did put some background information on him as well, so it'll be a bit of a mix, so that way it's not just the essay part while everyone goes, well, I don't know what else he did. So here we go. Okay, so this is Pomona Hall, which is, if you're familiar, where Holland Towers is now on Water Street. This is Harm Jan Huidekoper's house, which is about where that location is. In fact, in the yard, there is a copper beech tree or two which were brought over from the Huidekoper family from Europe. And you'll see, so those purple beech trees, there's a few there. There's a few at the Baldwin Reynolds house because the Reynoldses married into the Huidekoper family. So those are, and there might be one up near Juniper Village, which was also a Huidekoper property if it's still living. So that said, there's some living remnants of the Huidekoper's time in Meadville. But the first part about this that we will talk about is actually Harm Jan Huidekoper's lack of being impressed by Meadville, Pennsylvania when he first came here. So why not start it with a cut? So this little journal that I have in my hand is written in French, and in 1802, Harm Jan Huidekoper came to Meadville at the request of Paul Boosty, who was agent for the Holland Land Company, and his intention was to sort of straighten out the bookkeeping for Major Roger Alden, who, relative of Timothy Alden of Allegheny College, was the agent for Western Pennsylvania for the Holland Land Company. And upon arriving, there are two different quotes that I'll share, one of which appears later in a more milded form that either he or one of his children wrote and attributed to him, and then one is a milded version of what's in this book that we won't go into complete detail on. But Meadville was, in 1802, a small village containing 25 or 30 houses. This is about 14 years after Meadville was founded, by the way. And a population of about 150 inhabitants. The country around it, was chiefly in a state of nature. That's the just general description. The slightly more interesting one, I think when Huidekoper entered Meadville, he may have questioned his life choices based on his statement. He noted at the time, the place has of little importance and the houses do not present a very attractive appearance. He mentions, to go further, that, where did it go? The buildings, which are almost all built of hewn beams or logs, do not present a very attractive appearance. Lime is totally lacking in the region, which obliges them to use a sort of clay to build their chimneys, a rather dangerous substitute, so they can neither plaster nor whitewash the interior of their houses. He also mentions that many of them are good-for-nothings and idlers who live in a disorder the likes of which he has never seen. So that said, had a moment of, well, I rode a horse for a long time for this. He stayed for a month or so and sorted out the affairs. He took a journal from town to town written in French, and in fact it's this one here, and to present to Paul Boosty of the Holland Land Company. And all that said, by the time of his death in 1854, he was considered one of Meadville's most treasured citizens and the founder or nurturer of many of its institutions and way of life. So we grow on people around here. All right. So, according to some histories that Alfred Huidekoper had written about his father, the Mennonites of Holland resembled Quakers in many respects. And Harm Jan Huidekoper on our left here was born April 3rd, 1776. So he is about as old as the country. In Hoogeveen, Holland, in the Drenthe province. He is the son of An Jans Huidekoper and Gesine Frederica Wolters. His grandfather, who's also An Jans, is actually pictured to the left there with the goat. He is 4 years old. This is a painting. We have a color copy of this painting. The original's in the family. Still, they've made us a canvas copy that's hanging at the Baldwin Reynolds house. So as the family presented it to us as the quote-unquote the goat boy, you now have a little bit of history behind it when you go to the museum, and may not wonder, well, you may still wonder why we have a picture of a boy with a goat on the second floor in a random area. So he was a Dutch Mennonite who was raised first at a local school until the age of 10, where he was sent to a boarding school in Hasselt, Holland. Spent the ages from 10 to 17 at boarding school, and at that time converted to Dutch Reformed as his religion of calling, before going to college in Krefeld, Germany until 19 years of age in 1795. His brother, Jan Huidekoper, Jan is sort of the Dutch way of saying John. His portrait is right here again, next to Harm Jan. This would be a half-brother. Funded his college endeavors. And then he was a merchant in Amsterdam and gave him basically two choices. I will fund your college career. You can either then come work for me, or I will pay for your trip to America. He was Harm Jan's wealthy benefactor, I guess you would say, for the trip, for getting started. And as we all know, Harm Jan chose the United States, and after 63 days at sea, enough time for him to learn at least a grasp of speaking the English language, which he taught himself on the boat. He ended up at New York Harbor. He had, for all intents and purposes, chose to become a farmer in New York. Found much of the area he had stopped at initially as less than fertile and easy to work farmland, and decided then to venture to the Holland Land Company. A little bit of a background on the Holland Land Company. I'm doing a program later this year on that, but just enough to kind of go, okay, what are we talking here? 1792 and 1793, 13 Dutch investors purchased over 3 million acres in western New York and western Pennsylvania. And the idea was originally, for lack of a better way to put it, an early get-rich-quick scheme. We're going to buy this land, we're going to sell it off at a profit, we'll all make our money back and then some. The problem was the development and survey of that land would be needed to sell it off. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take surveying, it's going to take road building, it's going to take some clearing, it's not as easy as just selling it on a map. So, that said, Huidekoper was stationed, if you will, for 30 days in Meadville in 1802, the quotes that we mentioned, with Roger Alden, and in 1804, Roger Alden resigned from the Holland Land Company from his books in 1802, I'm guessing with good reason. And Harm Jan Huidekoper applied for the position and moved back. So 2 years later, not 50 years later, 2 years later, after saying all of those things, said, you know what, let's do it again. That said, his first sort of major role in 1804, 1805 largely starting about January 1st, 1805, as the agent for the Huntington Land Company was actually to clear squatters off of property. The land company owns all of this acreage on a map, but has to now basically go out and defend those land titles. Land titles of which by 1805 went to the United States Supreme Court under Huidekoper's tenure. Fun fact, small world that it is. So the New York portions of the Holland Land Company, the western New York portions, were run by Joseph Ellicott, and he and his brother Andrew Ellicott were surveyors. The small world that it is, Andrew Ellicott, also involved in western New York's children are Jane Ellicott Reynolds, mother of William Reynolds of the Baldwin Reynolds house, and Sarah Ellicott Baldwin, Sally Baldwin of Henry Baldwin of the Baldwin Reynolds house. So all that said, these people are very much intertwined, not just personally, but through business and whatnot from very early on. Tying in just one more, another daughter is Lucretia Ellicott Bliss. Her and her husband, John Bliss, owned where Holland Hall is next door to the Baldwin Reynolds house. And I believe I'm looking at Tom because I believe there's a program on Lafayette. Correct. And Colonel Bliss actually was the gentleman who led Lafayette into town as he was coming through. So again, the small world after all. In 1805, Harm Jan Huidekoper is by this point trying to convince Rebecca Calhoun, who's the young lady on the right, to be his bride, somewhat at first without much effect. We have some of his love letters to her, and they're very eloquent. "Dear Madam, if you might forgive me for spending this time to detail just the feelings of my heart," and so forth. And this is a young man who had just gotten to Meadville. She's from Carlisle, and he had no house at this point and was just starting off. Well, he wanted to fix that. So he purchases about 30 acres down where, again, on Water Street, where Holland Towers is now, and builds Pomona Hall, the picture that we saw earlier. He does convince her to marry him, and they are married September 1st, 1806. They have 7 children total. Anna and Frederick both passed away young, Anna at 1 year, Frederick at 8, and then Alfred, Edgar, Anna again, Frederick again, and Elizabeth Gertrude. A few of the Huidekoper connected buildings are still standing from his time here, or their time here. Unfortunately, as we know, Holland Towers is down there. The Johnson Shaw Museum is the land office that was built by Edgar and Alfred right after Harm Jan's death to move it from Harm Jan's house up to where they lived on Upper Chestnut. But the main one that was from that time would be Elizabeth Gertrude Huidekoper's house, which is owned by Mary Gurney at the corner of Grove and Chestnut. All right. Again, Pomona Hall, just a quick side shoot. Some of the things that will be on display this summer at the Baldwin Reynolds house that connect to this talk and whatnot, some of which, due to their size, value, etc., we didn't bring over, but to keep an eye out for. We do have, for example, a linen tablecloth made by Rebecca Calhoun Huidekoper. We do have portraits, and I mean the large portraits hanging on the walls of the Baldwin Reynolds house of many of the family, Harm Jan and Rebecca as well. We have some of Harm Jan's books. We have foot warmers that ladies would put the edge of their dress over to keep warm in the winter. The small wood ones with the metal box inside that you put coals from your fireplace. His saddlebags, as well as a hat, glasses, one of his shirts, etc. So some of those will be out this summer to connect. So if you do come on a tour, make sure you keep an eye out for that small exhibit. All right. Let's chat about Presbyterians. So before the Unitarian Universalist, Methodist, Episcopal churches, etc., we had, by about 25 years, we had the Presbyterian Church in Meadville, and this is located behind the courthouse in what was the old brick church. Unfortunately, and I was just chatting with Andy Pachaco over here as well earlier, just to ensure that I wasn't missing something, there isn't a good image of it for us to use in here. William Reynolds draws a very crude one that kind of looks like a square box that he made with a pencil with a triangular roof. It's not much to look at. This is an earlier view of Meadville after some of the churches and the 1820s courthouse are in place, so I used that instead. But I mentioned, so a little bit of Huidekoper's religions. As I mentioned, he was born Mennonite, converted to Dutch Reform by 17. Upon moving to Meadville, he was a Presbyterian by 1805. He didn't join the Presbyterian Church. His wife, Rebecca, did. But he still kept leadership roles there. He was on the committee of sale that raised funds through a pew auction and actually purchased 20 of the pews on his own to help get the brick church built. He was on the board of trustees at Allegheny College for many years, and until a feud between Presbyterianism and Unitarianism caused him to exit there, and we'll chat a little bit about that in the future here. He was very much involved in this building, which then shared, as the three churches that we're celebrating this year, the Unitarians, the Episcopalians, and the Methodists, all set up. That building was somewhat shared amongst as buildings were being created throughout the diamond here and in town. Right. Unitarianism. So how did he get here? We kind of chatted a little bit about where he was. According to his notes, the more he learned about Unitarianism is he taught his children religious studies, the more he was impressed. He lived in both Philadelphia for a time, and I'm going to butcher this and I apologize, Oldenbarneveld, New York, both of which had Unitarian churches. Largely, though, there are a couple of major connections through his papers and such that give a little bit more influence. One is a Pittsburgh glass maker by the name of Benjamin Bakewell. And in fact, there may be a glass Bakewell communion chalice in the church that we have paperwork on, but no actual chalice in our collection. Their letters, as early as the early 1820s, indicate that Bakewell and Huidekoper are talking Unitarianism. By 1823, Reverend Campbell dedicates the Pittsburgh Unitarian Church, and for all purposes, it sounds like Huidekoper is planning on converting at that time. Bakewell actually even sold some of the first religious tracts for Huidekoper to distribute up here as the church is sort of nurtured as a fledgling. He continued to stay as part of the Presbyterian congregation at first, and again mentioned he was still on the board of trustees at Allegheny until the new Presbyterian minister, and as a result the Erie Presbytery started having issues with those with Unitarian ideology. And he ended up resigning from the trustee board and leaving the church itself. At that point, fun facts, I mentioned Timothy Alden, Presbyterian, Allegheny College Presbyterian Church, Bentley Hall, named after Reverend William Bentley, who donated the Allegheny's first library, a Unitarian minister. So we could see things started to split as we went, and a little less understanding back and forth. So Huidekoper brings a gentleman by the name of John Mudge Merrick to Meadville in 1825 to teach his children. And as a result of this, we have the beginnings of the Unitarian Church, and here we are, 1825. At that point, almost immediately, Huidekoper delves into defending his new faith. The Crawford Messenger, then later the Crawford Weekly Messenger, Thomas Atkinson's paper, and the only newspaper in Meadville at that time, is publishing debates back and forth between Unitarians and Presbyterians. This is going to 1826. Huidekoper is writing on everything from defending Unitarianism in general to discussing Sunday mail delivery, which is very much, in Huidekoper's mind, considered a violation of the lack of Sunday mail delivery is a violation of church and state and should be unconstitutional in his mind. He takes some of these essays back and forth, or these articles back and forth, and he eventually gets into a bit of a mess through the newspaper and writes a 14-page pamphlet, a letter on the Unitarianism for the first 3 centuries of the Christian era. By the 1830s, he started the Unitarian Essayist, the first Unitarian periodical west of the Appalachian Mountains. And by 1835, Ephraim Peabody, who was a minister here at this church, or this congregation, I should say, before the church was built, who's now in Cincinnati at this time, is writing a Unitarian periodical called The Western Messenger. And Huidekoper ends up submitting 28 articles overall defending Unitarianism. Even as late as after Peabody is gone from that role and James Freeman Clark is editing, who is a Unitarian minister and Huidekoper's son-in-law. Let's see here. Huidekoper becomes the Meadville agent for the American Unitarian Association. He's the overseer of the Meadville Auxiliary for the American Unitarian Association. And they had 15 vice presidents for various functions from 1837 to 1847, of which he was one. At the same time that all this is happening, he is seeing multiple children get married, and this is the 1830s. His wife passes away. Anna, his daughter, marries James Freeman Clark. Frederick Huidekoper ends up in college at Harvard. Harm Jan Huidekoper is funding local abolitionism. And in 1836, Huidekoper purchases 58,300 acres from the Holland Land Company, effectively ending the Holland Land Company in western Pennsylvania. So when we think, he's doing a little bit here and there, 58,300 acres. Let that sink in for a second. Over $100,000 in cost in 1830s money. No, unfortunately, I should have looked up what that is in today with it, accounted for inflation, but I did not. So that all said, he's busy and still writing until about the time his wife passes. He takes a bit of a break. In 1836, he is the financier in many regards, the impetus for the creation of the Unitarianism in Meadville, and now he helps finance a new church building, the one we're standing in right now. So think of it this way: some of the pews you were sitting on for a while were kept warm by the Huidekopers. All right. That all said, in 1843, in this building, Frederick Huidekoper becomes a minister at large, or a missionary minister, for the Unitarian Church, and is ordained right here. However, they bring an ordained full minister in with the idea that Frederick's going to be the brains behind, again, remember, Harm Jan Huidekoper was involved in Allegheny College. Frederick's going to be the brains behind starting a Unitarian college. We have the Presbyterians. We're going to do this sort of epic battle of the early 19th century. We are starting the Meadville Theological School. Harm Jan Huidekoper is involved by donating $500. Again, think of the time periods. That's quite a bit more money than today. For books, he states that he will cover Frederick Huidekoper's wages, so there is no need for the school to immediately fundraise for Huidekoper to work there. And he purchases Divinity Hall, which was a previous church building, and had it renovated to create the first building for the Meadville Theological School. It wasn't quite ready in October 1st, 1844, when the school welcomed their first classes. So those of you who know where Meisner Funeral Home is, at the corner of Liberty and Chestnut, and it has the stone dog in the front, that was originally, there was a building there called Meadowside, owned by Harm Jan Huidekoper's son Alfred, brother of Frederick Huidekoper of the Theological School. Meadowside was his house. The first class was in his basement. So we got there, but it took a little while. Huidekoper passed May 22nd, 1854 at the age of 78. In that time, between the starting of the school and then, 47 students graduated and to become ministers. According to James Freeman Clark, his accounting of Huidekoper's passing, after a long day, he rested in his usual health. In about an hour, his children were called to his side, and in another hour, the spirit, well taught by life's expenses, had taken a step onward and had passed the veil. He passed away at Pomona Hall, which is, again, where Holland Towers is. He was buried at the family cemetery there, which was later moved to the Huidekoper plot at Greendale Cemetery when Greendale Cemetery was opened. In his time in Meadville, he was the inspiration behind, and in many cases the financier for, the Unitarian Church, the Meadville Theological School, trusteeship at Allegheny College, including, and I did not know this, and I don't know why I did not know this, but I did not know this, that Andy mentioned earlier, was involved in acquiring the windows for Bentley Hall. The early Presbyterian church here, the French Creek Feeder Canal. He was an abolitionist, funding Fitz Randolph and others who were stops on the Underground Railroad, was involved with and then bought out the Holland Land Company, and was the patriarch of the most influential family in Meadville history. His descendants, be it in second or third generation, created things such as, or helped found the hospital, the library, Hillside Home, which was up on Williamson Road, railroads, as we mentioned, land, you name it. So this is, we have a great deal owed, not just on the Unitarian end, but every citizen of Meadville and arguably Western Pennsylvania owes a great deal to Mr. Huidekoper. And that said, I will do my best to answer any questions. Yes?
When he left the Presbyterian Church to come here, did his wife also leave the Presbyterian Church?
I have not seen one way or the other. Have you?
I think she might have kept her membership there.
Okay.
And I don't think she fully withdrew from the church.
Okay.
But
I'm sure she probably hunched down slightly in the pews on Sundays after that for a while, especially when it hit the newspapers, but yeah, talk about an awkward situation in a very small town. Other questions? Yes?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch.
That's okay.
As he passed, he was buried in one place, then
Yes, so he was buried, if you're down on Water Street where Holland Towers is, that was the Huidekoper estate down there where Pomona Hall was. There was a small family cemetery, and now when Greendale Cemetery opened at the top of Randolph, if you go right through the gates at Greendale and turn left immediately through the gates, that first section right there on the left-hand side is the Huidekoper plot. You can walk right up through there and see most everyone we've mentioned and more. Yep.
just to add to her question, the original cemetery was along essentially where Linden Street is today. You can see this on early Crawford County map. And I think, in reality, when you drive through the intersection on the Parkway at Linden Street, you're essentially driving over what used to be the Huidekoper family plot. So that was part of the estate, and Pomona Park there where the trains are is reflective of Harm Jan Huidekoper's estate. Happy used to say that.
Yes?
When did Pomona Hall torn down?
So Pomona 1, there was a fire, and then Frederick, who inherited the house, tore it down and built Pomona 2, same name. It was into the mid-20th century. Westinghouse actually bought the building, and some of you might recognize what looked like a battleship gray, slightly fort-like structure on where Holland Towers is. They stripped most of the porches off of it and used it as their headquarters for a time. And so at least the carriage house, you mentioned into the 40s, maybe even the 50s.
Carriage house or the
And
land.
I was going to say the land office, and then yeah, by the end it looked very much, almost like I said, almost fort-like. They took a brick building and stripped every last porch off around the outside, and it looked very bare. But it was the Westinghouse headquarters. Yes.
When you said that Harm bought off the remaining acreage of the Holland Land Company in the 1830s?
1836, yeah.
Do you know where that land was? I'm wondering if that was when he bought essentially he had pretty much all the west side of Pontiac Lake. And it was around that time that he at least had a lot of that.
Off the top of my head, I don't. However, in our collection, we do have a couple of listings and essays of his land holdings upon his death in the 1850s that might reference that we can check in at some point at the Historical Society. But yeah, the running history nerd joke on the Holland Land Company in Western Pennsylvania, the only people who ended up making money at the end were the Huidekoper family. I mean, they had grand aspirations, and by the time all was said and done, he bought them out, and then him and his descendants. The Holland Land Company was hoping to play it on the short game, and the Huidekopers really realized to make money off this, you have to play the long game on the land speculation end of things. Yes, sir.
So 58,000 acres, that's roughly 10 miles square. That's just a small patch when you have a map. What happened to the rest of the land?
Well, the Holland Land Company had been selling it off steadily throughout that time. He bought the remnants of whatever hadn't sold. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't the Greendale, it's not just a plot, it's a mausoleum.
Now, the mausoleum has in it, Harm is in the ground behind. The mausoleum in the front has his son Alfred and his wife and their children and that branch of the family. And that's actually, unfortunately, that's why the mausoleum is somewhat in the condition that it is. That branch of the family has, by the late 1940s, 47, 48, had all passed away. So the Huidekopers that are alive are sort of the first, second cousin, 2 and 3 times removed situation, not the, oh, my great-grandfather's buried in there. Most of the ones who are living are actually, their ancestors are buried in the ground behind. But yes, there's a fairly substantial section there for the Huidekopers and Shippens and those branches of some of our sort of town founders. Yes?
Are there any Huidekopers left here in the Meadville area?
In the Meadville area, no. They do make sort of intermittent trips back. We've had, I think, 3 or 4 different relatives come through in the last 5 or so years. The most recent was, what was that? Maybe was no, I'm thinking what, October? September, October? Early November. Okay. So yeah, Peter Huidekoper would have been early November. We gave him sort of the whirlwind tour, and then he actually came here for a Sunday service. So every once in a while, we still get visitors, but no long-term residents.
Where were you located? All over the place? Or?
Several of them are in New England, the Boston area. There are a few in sort of the Fort Lauderdale, Florida area, and then several in Colorado. Yes?
The theological picture of the school,
Yeah.
was that on Upper Arch Street?
So there were 3 buildings originally. One, actually that one is gone. And then, yes, Alden Place is one of the buildings.
Yeah.
And Talon Building number 1, the actual headquarters was one of the buildings. Okay.
That was actually my question, was where the theological school was.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Upper Arch, Upper Pine. Yes?
I was just going to say that the Meadville Theological School ended up moving and combined with, it's now Meadville Lombard that is located in Chicago.
Yes.
So it lives on.
When Elizabeth Gertrude Huidekoper passed away, she was sort of the die-hard trustee that was really tying it to Meadville. And after she passed away, the connections keeping it here started to dissipate, and it's now under the umbrella of the University of Chicago. But it's still around today.
That basically went all the way to the state Supreme Court because there was a contest that for people that wanted it to remain here. And it took 20 years to go through that process. The determination being that the trustees could determine the primary site of business, but it was still, I think, a Pennsylvania nonprofit.
Oh, okay. I did not know it stayed a Pennsylvania nonprofit after the move.
I think so.
Wow. She said that there was a court case that went to the state Supreme Court over its exit of Meadville. And because of the trustees, many of the trustees were trying to keep it here. And she said it stayed a Pennsylvania nonprofit, even though the trustees could choose that its place of business moved to Chicago, even though the organization itself stayed a PA nonprofit. Yeah.
Just to add to that, that's why they combined with Lombard College. They bought Lombard College's charter. Lombard College was a Universalist school in Illinois. They bought the charter so that they could then move the school to Illinois.
Transferred completely.
Lombard Theological School comes from. But this lady over here, she is correct that the original Meadville Theological School charter remained in Pennsylvania despite the school's closure here in 26?
I think 26, yeah.
Yeah, so we're coming up on the centennial of that and their removal up to Chicago.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Josh, you said $100,000 he bought the...
It was over. I'm trying to think.
I found a website on there because I was curious. It's
Give me-
around $3 million today. That's what that $100,000 would be worth today.
Let me grab the exact, because it was even a little higher than that. I want to say it was 114, but I can't remember 100%. 178,400. So if you want to run that for us again real quick, we'll give you a new total.
Yeah. So,
178,400.
yeah, that's about $6 million according to this calculation, right? This website.
So Huidekoper wasn't exactly hurting.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you all so much. If you have any questions after, feel free. Also, there are some items up here that we brought from the collection. So, quick note of the Huidekoper collection. Just about every piece of paper that Harm Jan Huidekoper received in the mail at any point in time ended up at the Historical Society. So we have about 10 or so document boxes of his collection, about a box of his wife's collection, some of the daguerreotype photos of the house, of the kids, of you name it, some of the early Unitarian papers, the original deed to this building. Yeah, I mean, so there's quite a bit over there. And then as the family's ties to Meadville sort of dissipated, the generation that was passing away in the 40s, 50s, and so forth placed a lot of those papers, a lot of portraits, a lot of furniture, and what have you, and a lot of what you see at the Baldwin Reynolds house on tours, because it kind of goes back and forth between the Reynoldses and then also sort of as the county museum, if we mention a lot of those things, or because as the family was sort of dissipating from the area, they were placing those things for safekeeping at the Historical Society. So we do have some things you're welcome to come up and take a peek at. And thank you again.
Before you go, first I want to congratulate everybody here for loving local history. You guys are, have a big bonus for you waiting at the Parish Hall, where we have cookies and drinks and things for you to enjoy. And please, I want you to look at our newly refurbished Victorian parlor, which we've worked really hard to restore. So now let's give Josh a big hand. Thank you.